Ensuring your baby gets the nutrients they need to support their growth and development is a top priority for every parent. That's why millions around the globe have turned to A2 Platinum as the formula they trust. A2 Platinum Premium Infant Formula is nutritionally complete with whole milk as the first ingredient. Their A2 whole milk comes from specifically selected cows that naturally produce milk containing only the A2 protein and no A1. With 30-plus select nutrients, A2 Platinum is specifically designed with tiny tummies in mind and without worry of harmful chemicals. Quality and safety are the #1 priority for A2 Platinum. Plus, they are Clean Label Project Purity Awards certified. Join millions of parents and choose A2 Platinum for your little one. Right now, for a limited time only, A2 is offering podcast listeners 25% off their first purchase when you use promo code PODCAST25 at checkout on Amazon or at a2platinum.com. Again, for 25% off your first order, go to Amazon or a2platinum.com and use the promo code PODCAST25.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody walks into the elevator and says,
Happy Friday!
Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site covering your Cardinals, and recording on a Tuesday afternoon following the Cardinals' 30-17 Week 15 victory over the New England Patriots. Episode 625. Co-host Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com at SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. Seth, hey, that game, it's what the Cardinals needed. It was basically exactly what the Cardinals needed, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they're back on the winning side of things, which is nice because we've been kind of waiting patiently for this to happen. I think you and I kind of saw it playing out this way, and I think I was really close. I had it 27-17.
You had 27-17. I had 27-16. 30-17. That was good. Only too bad. You like for the kicking props for the Patriots. Joey Sly was, what was it, plus 125 for 2+ field goals. Oh well.
Yeah, missed it. And classic Patriots guy. And it's just interesting to see this team, come out, play well enough to beat a team. Offensively, I thought they were really efficient again. There's some things that we'll discuss as we go through, but they've shown a propensity to have good efficiency throughout, which is really good. Defensively, I thought they were really good on defense on 3rd and 4th down, and that was kind of the key to the game to me, because I don't think overall their defense was great this week, but I thought in certain aspects, in certain plays, their defense was really good, and that changed the outcome of the game. Ironically, and maybe not ironically, I mean, we kind of knew that it was possible because they do have a good, Ramondre Stevenson's a nice kind of James Conner-ish type of runner, right? And then Antonio Gibson's a very nice change of pace, athletic back. They had a decent day on the ground, but as we talked about, the fact that the Cardinals got ahead made it that they had to throw the ball, and then you rely on a rookie on the road at a semi-home game, right? And you're able to get away with it, and those things all matter. And at the end of the day, a win is a win, but there's definitely some things that you look at and go, okay, that needs work, and that's where this team is. And going back to what you and I have talked about, you do wonder if we got a little ahead of ourselves with that 4-game win streak. A couple of them were I don't want to say fluky, but they took care of business against a good Miami team, what looks like a decent, albeit fairly equal to the Cardinals, would you not disagree, Chargers team, and then 2 terrible teams. I mean, the Bears are awful. The Jets won.
Jets were a mess.
Yeah, the Jets won yesterday, but before that, they'd lost, I think, they lost 4 in a row, including that Cardinals game. Now, ironically, every game was close, but they're just not a very good team. And so it was interesting to kind of look at all of that, because they've played, obviously 4 games post bye week. They're 1-3, and they've beat a team they should beat. And on paper, they've lost to teams that they probably are not as good as.
It's like, if you look at it, their losses, they lose to Buffalo, best team in the AFC right now. They lose to Washington. Okay, that's a playoff team. You lose to Green Bay, that's a playoff team. You lose to Detroit, also best team in football. You lose to Seattle twice. You lose to Minnesota. They've got 12 wins. You lose to Seattle twice. Those two games are the ones you just really feel like you're disappointed in, because even if you consider Seattle an even team with them, you can probably say that you want to split those games at least, which the losing both of them put them in the situation that they're in now. Like, my initial take at this win, it didn't feel like a great performance, but then you look and saw that they scored 13 points, and then they held the Patriots 0-for-6 on third downs. You're like, it's a good win. It didn't feel like a dominant win, but it was them just being effective. It was a boring win, but the Cardinals needed a win. And I think that's what they forgot how to win games. And I don't know if you can start building off this one, but at least you get the feeling back, because it had been a month since they'd won a game. They had the bye, then they lose 3 in a row. And that's the thing. You forget the feeling of what it is, of how to win a game, of what it works is to be ahead. And it kind of becomes a habit. And so they needed a win of some sort. And you kind of look at the Atlanta Falcons last night, highly unimpressive, but they got the win they needed, and then you just hope they kind of build off of that. And at least the Cardinals, I mean, you look at the score and it feels like that should have been a good win. Did you feel like any point during that game, yeah, this is a good win? It was like you were happy, like the Cardinals were in control of the game. They were in control the entire time, but it never felt like you didn't come out of that game feeling great. You were just like, okay, I didn't. That's, at least for me, I didn't feel great coming out of the win. I'm like, it's a win, and they didn't do anything that really. There wasn't anything like they weren't in danger of losing. Like Atlanta really struggled in their game, but I came away from that game just not satisfied, even though that's exactly what they needed.
Yeah, and it was just ugly. I mean, there was times where it was really just an unimpressive effort, but it's not about anything more than this point, just stacking wins, and it's something that this team desperately needed, like you said, and
more than vibes, they need wins.
Right, and that's where it's at now, and we'll see how it kind of turns out.
Yeah, coming up next on the Rise This Year podcast, Mr. Cardinals talking about. Let's work on the offensive side of the ball. What do we think about the offensive play, how things went, and the play of Kyler Murray? That's coming next on Rise Up See Red.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like getting right out of bed late for work, yet your hair looks immaculate. No blow dryer, no comb, no sculpting gel. Just a flawless look. As if you walked out of your house and straight onto the cover of a men's fashion magazine.
Good morning, Steven. Oh, have you done something new with your hair? It looks amazing.
They don't have the slightest clue you were half asleep drooling on your pillow not 10 minutes ago. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico. How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody walks into the elevator and says,
Happy Friday.
Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico. How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like getting right out of bed late for work, yet your hair looks immaculate. No blow dryer, no comb, no sculpting gel. Just a flawless look. As if you walked out of your house and straight onto the cover of a men's fashion magazine.
Good morning, Steven. Oh, have you done something new with your hair? It looks amazing.
They don't have the slightest clue you were half asleep drooling on your pillow not 10 minutes ago. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
Back on the Rise of Spirit podcast, best our Cardinals talk on the web. The Cardinals had nearly 400 yards of offense. They were 10 of 15 on third down. James Conner ran for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyler was efficient, 23 for 30 for 224. Didn't have a touchdown or an interception. Trey McBride had a big game, 9 catches for 87 yards. Greg Dortch showed up, 3 catches for 60 yards. How did you feel about the offense? Remember when we talked about kind of the preview? You know, they just needed a boring offensive game. The running back and tight end offense. It came back. You got 138 total yards from James Conner. He scores 2 touchdowns. You get Trey McBride with a big game, 9 catches for 87. I mean, and then he got sprinkled in a couple other things. I mean, offensively, there was nothing impressive. It wasn't like, offense, but it was efficient. I think that's the most important thing, is that it was efficient. And if you look at, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 drive time positions, 8 because one would ran up the clock. They got 1, 2, 3, 4. They had 6 scoring drives. 6 scoring drives on 8 possessions before they just ran the clock out. You really can't be unhappy about that at all, especially since they, red zone wise, they did better. They were 60% in the red zone, 3 out of 5. And after they went 3 for 13 in the previous 3 games, I mean, I guess the vibes weren't there, but the efficiency was.
Yeah, and that's all. It was just figuring that out and getting, all of that taken care of. And it was good to see it work out in the end, because like you said, they just haven't had that over the last couple. I mean, the Minnesota game was good, but they were playing a superior team, so their mistakes showed up more. Whereas this week they did have some mistakes, but they're able to get away with it playing against a porous, New England Patriots team. Those are, and that's the thing, is when you're talking about getting to X during the season, these are games you have to win. And again, we can talk and lament the Seattle situation all you want. They haven't lost to a team they should have lost to. Now, you can say that they lost, the way they lost to the Commanders was inexcusable, but the Commanders are a playoff team, right? Like, so they haven't had, knock on wood, that bomb yet, right, against a bad team. And that's kind of where you're at with this team more than anything, is that you just want to continue to see them putting themselves in a position to finish strong, to have a Saturday night football game in December, right, in late December. And that was just, again, not something we expected. And the reality is now that, two of your 7 losses are to the top teams in the NFC, the Lions and the Vikings. Another loss is to the number 2 seed in the AFC, the Bills. And then your other losses are to the Packers, Commanders, and then the ones that, again, bad is probably a strong word, but don't look as good, is clearly the Seahawks, where they were, kind of jack stomped in a game against the Green Bay Packers this weekend. So, those are the things that you're looking at from this coming out of it and saying like, hey, they won a game, and then kind of going from there, right?
Yeah, and it's fun to see. The offense was efficient. How did you think Kyler played? Because a lot of what's coming out of that game, Dan Baker talked about it. It was a big deal on the TV broadcast. That one play where he got picked off, and it was negated by the questionable roughing the passer penalty. But people seem to have completely lost faith in Kyler Murray. And he had the 5 turnovers over the previous 3 games of the losing streak, and he almost turned the ball over. If it weren't for the penalty, it would have been another interception. It feels like people are bailing on Kyler again when we're in the middle of what is nearing the end of what so far has been a highly successful season. And he hasn't been bad, but it's like we said before the season. What Kyler needs, like honestly, what fans need from Kyler to be won over, video game numbers or big wins. And since they had the losing streak, he's not winning and he's not got video game numbers. And so what you're just getting is overall, and we broke down the turnovers that he had. A lot of them are just circumstances. Others, were mistakes. But like overall, I mean, Kyler played well, I thought. You always hate when there's not any touchdown passes, and it's almost comical how Trey McBride can't get a touchdown catch. He's now up to 87 for the season, and up to 89 for the season with no touchdowns, which I believe that they said on the TV broadcast sets the NFL record for the most catches in a season without a touchdown reception, beating Deontay Johnson's to 86. And oddly enough, the one that broke the record that gave him number 87 was the play, the shovel pass at the goal line where you thought was supposed to be a touchdown. He shut. They were trying to get to a touchdown, and they're like, "Fine, we'll give it to James Conner then." And James Conner, bowls his way up to 2 touchdown runs, loading up. But yeah, it's just I thought. I mean, that wasn't a dominant performance by Kyler, but should we have needed a dominant performance by Kyler against the New England Patriots? No, we shouldn't. We didn't. And yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what people are expecting, because we are seeing a level of play at quarterback that I don't know if we've ever seen between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But then you got Patrick Mahomes, who's hobbling his way around, making just enough plays. And that's kind of the way Kyler's playing this year.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because, I text you guys, and it's funny because it's almost like a press situation where, he's feeling like he needs to make more plays. But the reality is this team only thrives if he's not turning the ball over. And the fact is that, this team has struggled when he does turn the ball over. And I sent you and in our group text the text messages, right? Like when Kyler turns the ball over at all, this team is 2-4. When he doesn't turn the ball over, they're 5-3. So, that's a huge difference. These other quarterbacks, it's just interesting. And trust me, you and I have talked about this, like 100%. He needs to, I think more than anything of play better, it needs to be more consistent, right? Like that's where we're at, is like there needs to be more consistency. But the Chiefs are 7-1 this year when Patrick Mahomes has a turnover. 7-1. Could you imagine like what it would be like to have your quarterback
that's wild. That's crazy.
Make a mistake and then not have any issues. The Bucs are 5-3 when Baker has a turnover. Even crazier is they have a winning record when he has more than 2 interceptions in a game. 3-2. Like,
that's because he's always throwing 3 or 4 touchdown passes to go with him. I look at Baker Mayfield's number. I was saying Baker Mayfield is the new Jameis Winston, but a little bit better because like he does turn the ball over. Like it seems like regular. He's got 3 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions. But the Bucs need every touchdown pass that he's producing at a super high level. It's fun to watch him play. And not quite as you don't quite have the same variance that you do with Jameis, right?
Right. And so that's just, kind of where it's at this point is like, again, would we like more? Absolutely. Doesn't matter. No. Like, and that's the thing is like, it's the unevenness of the play is the problem, and you and I agree with that. But like when you're talking about 23 of 30 for 224, you can't get upset about that. Like that's not
Baker Mayfield has 5 interceptions in the last 3 games. They're 3-0. The Cardinals went 0-3 when Kyler threw 5 interceptions in 3 games.
Well,
it's a completely different world. It's like if Kyler isn't playing great, Cardinals can't win. They can't even compete. If he's playing average, they're a below average team. When he plays great, they're an above average team. It's, oh my gosh. Like,
well, Jess, could you imagine if Kyler threw for 130 yards and 3 interceptions? They lose by what? 20?
Yeah.
And Bo Nix does that in a game and they win by 18. Like that's the thing. Like look at you mentioned Baker. Like look at Bo Nix last 2 games. His last 2 games alone, he is 38 for 73 for 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. And you said it. They're 2-0. They're 2-0. He has a 60 quarterback rating. And
must
like
nice.
Right. And that's the whole point. It's like there needs to be improvements on Kyler's end. 1000%. You and I have never said like, oh, he's playing fine. Like this is a sustainable way of winning. But it's also unsustainable to expect a guy to win or to play at MVP level or a high level every single time he steps on the field and never be able to have a bad game. And that's just kind of where we're at with
especially we always have questions about this offense because the question is the offense is James Conner and Trey McBride. And it looked genius last year. It looked genius last year in the second half of the season because the Cardinals didn't have any receivers. And Harrison was kind of shut down again. I don't know, like, when I was watching the game, my son was over, and that first catch that he had, the 23-yarder, that concept was exactly what they need to give him more of, where they get him the ball while he's on the move rather than just covered down the field. And I'll say this, Christian Gonzalez played a hell of a game against him.
Well, he's a great
cornerback. I mean, he's a great cornerback.
But
they don't do Harrison any favors in terms of the ways they use him.
No, they don't. And that's the frustrating thing more than anything. And that's what kind of, as fanalists or whatever you want to call us, right? Like we look at this and we say, this is an unsustainable way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because you're asking a guy to make plays and he's not, and then you're like, well, he's not doing enough. And it's like, well, then, why do they not? I looked it up, Jess. This is wild to me. Wild. Do you know how many targets he has behind the line of scrimmage? on the season?
What, 4?
0.
It's 0.
So like they don't even throw him the ball behind the line of scrimmage.
Like none of those cheap, like Larry Fitzgerald, the cheap Larry Fitzgerald screens to get him that, just to get that catch streak going.
Right.
Yeah, Harrison doesn't get those. He doesn't, and we know that. Like he's got speed, he can move with the ball.
Well, and so what's crazy to me is like literally no attempts or no targets behind the line of scrimmage. Even inside of 10 yards. Inside of 10 yards, he has 28 attempts.
That's it.
Or 28 targets. His targets are mostly 10 plus yards down the field. He has 40 targets in the medium range and 22 deep targets. Like it's not good, man. Like it's not a good way to deploy a rookie. And it's just not.
Yeah, they let Trey McBride want a quick 8-yard out. I keep saying this. Where are the Cliff King 7-8 yard outs? Let's just get those. Just give them a win. And now, one of the things that Howard pointed out recently in the game, will probably texted to me, is like, because the Cardinals over their final 3 drives went 5 for 5 on 3rd down, and it was when Kyler stopped trying to get the ball to Harrison. And in fairness, like when he sees there are keys that they look at, and when they've got man coverage, they've got man beaters called, and Kyler tries to let his guys make plays, and that's the type of player Marv's supposed to be. He just isn't quite there yet, or whatnot. Like what Drew Terrell, their receivers coach, said last week, I fully believe. I think one of the things that is holding Harrison back from being great is simply I don't consider it he's got a humility that's a little too humble, just too humble. Like, be that dog. Be like he says, he wants Marv to come in. He's like, I'm Marvin effing Harrison Jr. I want the ball, and that mentality, he just needs a little bit. I don't want him to become diva or become like his dad in terms of that sense, but just a little bit. Like, I want the ball, give me the ball. Like when the ball's in the air, he's going to go get it. We see that. That's the main difference. And if you're looking at, say, Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, look at, like, Justin Jefferson is angry at the ball. He wants it. You get that. You don't get that vibe from Harrison. He's a great football player. Works extremely hard. He's very serious about his craft, but just a little more intensity, just a touch. Just take a little bit of Trey McBride and put it just a little bit and put it in Marv, and that would be great.
Yeah, and they need to get there, but he's also on pace for over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. So it's like,
which he's gonna, like, his next touchdown catch will tie the rookie receiving touchdown record, where that includes Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden. So right. It's only disappointing because we were thinking 1,300 yards. We're like, oh, if he has less than 1,100 yards in a season, it's going to be disappointing. I'm like, I mean, maybe it's disappointing because there's plays on the field that have been left. But
I think that's where it's disappointing, is that the targets. But you look at Larry's rookie season: 115 targets, 58 receptions, 780 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's like kind of eerily similar, right? Like, yeah. And so
they did have Anquan Bolden on that team, which make it. But at the same time, you could say the same thing, because you've got Trey McBride, who is the big time volume ball catcher, right? And so you look at it again. Would we all love for him to have a little more? Absolutely. But it's not like he's playing at a bus level that we let's be frank. Some of the discussions online seem to imply, right? Like, he's not playing that poorly. So it's just it's not at the high level that we were hoping it would be, but at the same time, it's not as bad as everybody's trying to make it out to be. Yeah, coming up next on the Rise Up Series podcast, Best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. What do we like? What do we didn't like? That's coming up next on Rise Up Red. Back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Now looking on the defensive side of the ball, the Cardinals overall solid defensive performance. They got a turnover. They held New England to 0 for 6 on third down. They had that great stand, the fourth down stop, and they picked up a couple of sacks. Darius Robinson got his first career sack. It was one of those 0-yarders. Baron Browning, I thought he was going to end up with more the way he beat Verdarian Lowe on that one. Like, oh my gosh, on his sack play, Lowe had no chance of blocking him. And there were a couple other times that I think Browning might have gotten a little too cute because he beat him off the line of scrimmage and that one with the inside move when he probably could have beaten him outside. But yeah, that was good to see. Sean Murphy Bunting had an interception. No one in the passing game was dominant. Ramondre Stevenson was more productive, more efficient than he had been basically all season, averaging 5.3 a carry when he's averaging less than 4 on the season. And Drake May looked good. I mean, they will say this is that there's one thing you come away with is that you're impressed with Drake May and you feel like the Patriots have at least that piece in place because he was both effective, made great decisions, made some heady plays you don't expect rookies to make, and showed some athleticism.
Yeah, and this was a defensive game where I think we're starting to see the maturation of how good this secondary can be. I still think that they need, another guy. I think Williams is potentially a star. Max Melton's playing very well. Although he didn't play a ton this week, right? But
he came out with a shin injury but then went back in.
But Sean Murphy Bunting, he's been unfortunately kind of the weak link, right? Like he's been and like you said, he
hasn't been bad. There were a couple of games where he was bad, but everything else he's just been all right. He's been fine.
Right. And so they're close in the secondary. I feel like you and I agree their linebackers are good. The linebackers are one of those positions where you're like, you could probably upgrade them, but like, are you really gonna spend more high level assets to get them, right? And the defensive line, it let's be honest, it plays better than we expected, and that's you have to commend Nick Rallis, Jonathan Gannon, and the coaching staff for that. But from there, it's the pass rush was fine. I think you and I would agree we would have liked to see a little more.
It would have been great because the Patriots line is so bad.
Right. And so, so slightly disappointing, but again, take care of business. So I'm not going to get too upset.
Well, if you look at statistically, Kyle Odegaard put this up on Twitter today, their efficiency rankings, the improvement that they've made. They've gone from 22nd from year over year. So 2023 to 2024. Over the whole season last year, they were 22nd on offensive efficiency. They're a top 10 team. They're 10th, which vibes with the end of last season. Remember the final 8 games of the season, they were 10th in offensive efficiency. But last year they were second to last in defensive efficiency, and they're up to 22nd. And that was they had struggles early on in the season. But what we're seeing is that this defense isn't bad. It's not a good defense. It's not a bad defense, but it's an improving defense. And guess what? When you see offensive and defensive improvements at the same time, you start winning games.
Yeah, and they're getting there, and it's getting closer, and so it's fun to see, right? It's fun to see what we are. It's fun to see the improvement when we know that they're not quite incredibly talented on that side of the ball yet. Is that the fairest way to put it? Like they still lack a little bit of talent. I think I think you're comfortable with like Zaven Collins being a starting outside linebacker because he's so good against the run, right? But we know he's not a great pass rusher, and so.
But get back healthy Ojulari, you bring back Browning. You'd like to bring someone in. Hey, like Micah Parsons. Let's throw some money at Micah Parsons or someone like that. But that he could definitely be better. The defensive line.
You know what?
You're going to get guys back. You're going to get Justin Jones back. You're going to get Bilal Nichols back, and so
and Darius Robinson looks like he's going to be a player. Now it's obviously you got to take everything with a grain of salt. We're talking about 82 snaps so far, but he looks like a guy that can play, and that's fun. But the defense was. I will say this: it was much like the offense. It was good enough, but slightly underwhelming. That's probably where I would put this. Like you said, we're kind of like, hey, can you just beat the tar out of this team, right? Like, and instead you got, you got instances where you're like, oh, this is, we're not finishing like we would hope. And so that's the bugaboo of the situation. It wasn't bad by any means. We're not saying it was bad at all. It's just like, you're like, really? You couldn't just blow this team out? Like you couldn't you give, like you said, Ramondre Stevenson basically had his best game of the season. And so those are so you look at it and you go, I'm okay. It's fine. But in reality, the defense wasn't great this week. They allowed them to do a little more than we wanted to. And you look at his yards per attempt. This was his second best game of the season from a yards per attempt perspective. It's just, again, it was good enough, and you're not going to be like, oh, let's take it back because they didn't blow them out. But at the same time, you're like, I just feel like a little more could have. There was a chance.
Yeah, well, and you look at May's play, because he only had 4 incompletions the entire game. Is that the way you can check down all day against the Cardinals and move down the field. Like the only play on the ball that the only hand they got on the ball was Murphy Bunting's interception. That was it. And I know that's kind of by design because of the way they play. Is they let the other stuff the underneath stuff go, but teams are doing it. They're just dinking their way down the field. But that's how you end up with, they have over 300 yards of offense, which is right. And nobody on that, Drake May throws for 202 yards. Nobody has more than 44 yards. And even still, Kendrick Bourne had 44. 37 of them came on one play.
And even that, like, we were talking about the run by or the numbers by the other back is skipping my mind right now, Antonio Gibson, right?
And that 29 of his 33 yards came on one play.
Right, exactly. So it's not like, it wasn't like it was, fantastic by any means, but it is frustrating to see this team not play as well as we were hoping they would. But again,
it's because the way we saw them beat the Rams early, the way we saw them beat the Bears and the Jets. Yeah, I guess it was probably they were bad teams, but this is a different Patriot. The Patriots are different because the Bears were reeling, and they had expectations and are falling apart. The Jets falling apart. This Patriot team's not falling apart. They're actually ascending. And so I guess in fairness is there shouldn't be anything disappointing about that win. They had a 2-score win over a not great team. They scored 30 points at home. We just don't like it. Like the vibes, we like talking about the vibes, but the vibes make it sound worse. But the truth is they scored 30 points. They beat a bad team by nearly 2 touchdowns. They covered their spread, great teams cover the spread. They didn't make wild mistakes, but like they didn't
hit the under, so I'm very
disappointed. Yeah. That was the only thing. You're like, oh, Well, there's the over. Dadgummit.
But no, I mean, and you're right. And what's interesting is, I think a lot of people are like lauding the defensive performance, but like this was probably their third or fourth best offensive game of the season. So like, it's interesting how we'll be like, oh, this is the offense did just enough. It was like, no, this was a case this week where the defense did just enough, but the offense was fairly dominant. And that's where, again, you talk about the vibes, right? Like Kyler has a boneheaded play that doesn't count, and people are going, oh, and it's like, wait, it didn't count. Like we know what the outcome was, and they won. They scored 30 points. They had almost 400 yards total of total offense, the fourth most yards of the season. This was their third most efficient game of the season from a expected point standpoint. Like this was a like literally, you could almost say this was a great offensive game.
Right, but it didn't feel like it. This is because it was boring. It was boring. There was the catch and run by Greg Dortch. You had one nice. There were basically three nice pass plays. The initial one to Harrison, the catch and run by Dortch, the down the field catch throw to McBride, but you didn't have any touchdown passes, and then it was just James Conner grinding away. He had 110 yards. 53 of them came on one play, and it was just workman. It was a boring 30-point game. If that thing can exist, it was a boring 30-point game offensively because it wasn't exciting. It just was. They just scored points. And
right.
But I'm honestly, we shouldn't be upset about that. That's exactly what they need to do. That's exactly what they needed, especially after, because it wasn't like this. They didn't come out of this losing streak and barely beat a bad Patriots team. The Patriots could have had a lead, but they missed the field goal to start the game. But after that, the Cardinals, there was no threat. The Cardinals were in control of this game. They didn't have to win it at the end. They didn't need some wild thing. They beat a bad team handily, and we're sitting here feeling disappointed. What are we doing?
Right. So that's a nice thing.
Coming up next on the Rest of Your Podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's talk about couple other things. You got the playoff race, we got injuries, and got Budda Baker. Contract extension coming? That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Your Podcast, the best of our Cardinals Talk on the Web. The Cardinals, in addition to the win, got exactly the help that they needed from the division. It's now the Rams beating the 49ers. I guess either way would have been fine. But the Rams, here's the thing. It doesn't matter what the Rams do as long as the Cardinals beat them. So if the Cardinals keep pace with the Rams no matter what and beat them, then they're fine. But the Cardinals also got the help they needed from Green Bay as we expected it to go. The Packers went in and whooped the Seahawks 30-13 in a game that looked eerily like the game that the Packers played against the Cardinals. Josh Jacobs had 94 rushing yards. Jordan Love had 2 touchdown passes. Geno Smith and Sam Howell combined for 2 interceptions. Smith got hurt, injured his knee. His status for this next week is up in the air when they're going to have to play the Minnesota Vikings. And so things are playing out the way we need them for the Cardinals to still have a chance. So they're a game behind in the standings. And we played out the scenarios last week. Like the Cardinals, if at minimum they got to win, they got to beat the Rams and they got to beat the 49ers or it won't matter. But winning 4 games in a row puts them in control of things, provided the things with Seattle happen the way you're supposed to. But they got the help that they needed. So, hey, it's going to be the weekend before Christmas, and the Cardinals are still playing meaningful games and are in the mix for a division title. So, I mean, can we really complain that much?
No, and they're, like you said, they're where we wanted them to be, and they're playing at a high level, or they're playing for high stakes, and that's all we asked for. And again, what happens? Who knows? I mean, honestly, who
they might choke. They might.
And we'll talk about this on Thursday, right? But the reality of this situation is, and you and I talked about it off the air, every game is now an elimination game, every single game. And while there's mathematics that say like, hey, you can lose to Carolina and still win the division, the reality is, the vibes is, right, like if you lose to the Panthers, you're done. And so that's the whole thing where we're at right now, is that this is a team that has basically landed square in our expectations of where they should be, and not just that, has done basically all we asked them to do, right? Play meaningful football in December and potentially January.
And we'll keep going.
Oh no, and I was gonna say, and that's where they're at. And so again, can we lament certain things? 1,000%. We can be frustrated of the missed opportunities.
Yes, not knocking off Seattle in one of those games, they'd be in control of this division. They'd be in control of it. They would be in first place. And yeah, but no, that's now. We do have some interesting news coming from Craig Morgan of PHNX, who reported on Sunday that the Cardinals are in contract extension talks with Budda Baker, which makes sense. It 100% makes sense. When they got the deal done with James Conner, you had to feel like that one was coming. Do you think they get a deal done before the end of the year?
I mean, I hope so. I hope this is not something that plagues and plays out, because I think one of the things that's going to happen, if it does, Jess, is that depending on how the season ends, there are going to be some instances where you're not happy with how the season ends, right? Like if they end up losing to Carolina, right, and then God forbid they end up losing 3 in a row and finish 7-10. That's a tough way to end the season.
Yeah, it would be.
And so like getting this done ahead of time, like having everybody, like we said, I know we've joked about it a lot, but like having the vibes positive, whether they end up 8-9, 9-8, or 10-7, heading into the offseason, like, hey, we were there, man. Like, can you imagine if they're sitting at 9-7 going into the final game of the season? Like everybody would just be like, hey, they did it. Like, we'll see how it ends, but they did it. And
no, people won't be happy. People aren't going to be happy because of where they were. They lose those 3 games in a row. But come on, they get 9-7 now. Here's how my season played out. The way I picked it up, the way I picked things, but when the schedule first came out, I said they were going to be 8-7 going into the final 2 weeks and lose. Now I hope that doesn't happen. You guys know that that's not how I'm a Cardinals fan. I want them to win, but the script is playing out. The script is playing out right now, and yeah, we're there.
But we'll see how it turns out, because I think that they're in a good spot, man. I really do. I think that we have to get over the disappointment of those 3 games, and it's hard. And that's, I even wrote about this. I'm like, I get it. Like, it's really hard to look at that lost opportunity and go, it's okay. Right? Because the reality of the situation is it's not okay. Like, you want something bigger, you want something better, but they're on schedule of where we expected them to be. Those expectations just kind of flipped, and we changed our expectations to go, oh, this is a team that can compete this year. And I was like, you hit it at the beginning, Jess. Even if they win one of those Seattle games and they win this division, maybe they sneak by in the wild card, but probably not. Like, they're going to play the Vikings. And I know that Vikings game is close, but like, the reality is they're not quite there yet. They just weren't quite there yet. And that's okay. It's okay. Like, it doesn't take away from what they've done this season, what they've accomplished this season. It just is frustrating as a fan to go, oh, I thought they had it. And then they didn't. And so we get slightly frustrated that they're on schedule instead of ahead of schedule, right? And that is what really kind of drives this whole scenario as we finish out this season.
Yeah. Now, if the Cardinals can get Budda under contract, would be kind of fun with that is the fact that then it would take care of that. So we don't have to go into the offseason wondering he's under contract. Well, and we know the direction. We know he's here. It's going to save them. That's going to save them against the cap next year. Well, I don't know, because they're eating some of this year's cap to do it, but then they would have had a rollover. So I guess it's a wash either way. But it is set up, and we've talked about this. If the Budda Baker deal happens, 100% expect Jalen Thompson not to be on this team next year. That's the preview. That is the foreshadowing that if they re-sign Budda Baker, 100% Jalen Thompson won't be on this team next year, and they will be ready to move on with Rabbit. And simply because can you pay two safeties $32 million?
No.
And be a good team? No. And so that they'll if they commit to Budda, which by all means do it, especially the way he's played this year, you're gonna have to move on from Jalen, who's been unimpressive for the most part. He hasn't been bad. But he's been unimpressive in this defense. And
he had his best game of the season this last week, and it hardly
it hadn't even made a blip.
Yeah, hardly a blip was made. So it's unfortunate, but one, again, I like Jalen. I think he's a very talented player, but one, we're talking about a guy who has played on a bad defense for a lot of years. So I think there's some odd sentiment there, right? And then two, you are, that was the whole point, right? Draft guys to prepare for guys to leave and be ready and things of that nature. And it's not something that this team has done extremely well. And I think this regime is showing a little more that they're prepared for that and ready for that. And so that's, that is good, because I'm hopeful that this is the continuation and we continue to see the growth of the young players and we see more from this team, because it feels like they are closer. It does feel like that. And it would be nice to see it continue.
The injuries to note, the big one was Mac Wilson. We'll see how that goes with the concussion. Trey Benson injures in ankle, something that went unnoticed during the game. But it makes it kind of look like they might be without him this week, because just heard from Howard, and he'll have an article up on Cardswire about it soon, but they had their tryouts, and that included running back Tony Jones. They're already down to Amari DiMercato. DJ Dallas, I thought, did really well in that role as the third down back. But if Trey can't go, that means Michael Carter is going to play as the backup, as the number 2. DJ will continue to play that, but they need another running back. It's going to be interesting to see that they had Tony Jones in, because that signals to me that maybe I think they're anticipating Trey being out. Jesse Luketa got hurt. They didn't have any updates about him. He had a thigh injury during the game. Max Melton hurt his shin, but he came back in, so he should be good to go. So some injuries to watch. They have an open spot on the roster still. They have an open spot on the practice squad still, and that could change even with other injuries that might need to put guys on IR and things like that. So that'll wrap up this edition of the show. I will have a show with the Panthers writer this week. That'll record on Wednesday, drop on Thursday. Seth and I will be back later in the week to preview Cards and Panthers. It's a good time. It's a good time to be a Cardinals fan. It's exciting. This is different because it's not looking for hope next year. There's some competition now. So we'll be back again soon. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We will be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise up, See Red.
Red!